than a pair of old manky jeans. So Tim's probably the best person to ask. But,
Tim is actually looking on his phone at something else, so I'm not even going to ask him.
No, I'm looking at my phone at the Kate Spade story.
Oh, okay. Designer... I want to get Anna Stretton on, but just before I do, designer Tom Ford told the Financial Times, fashion is evil. You stay out for long, people forget who you are, your name loses power.
I don't know, you don't know what you don't know from being inside an industry, but there are a lot of ruthless industries out there, right? I mean, there's the
music industry.
Humans' ability to be ruthless to each other is not limited to one particular industry.
No, that's true. But New Zealand fashion designer Anna Stretton is kindly joining us, so I just want to ask her a couple of things. Good afternoon, Anna.
Hi, Jim. How are you?
The pressures of fashion. I mean, I know we're not Milan and Paris here, but they must exist in New Zealand as well.
Well, I suppose I just don't think you want to let fashion define you. That's probably key to it. But it is an incredibly disrupted and difficult industry. I mean, we've certainly seen a hell of a lot of demise in it over the last 12 months or 24 months. But, we're now playing on a global platform. We're up against, some of the biggest brands that have ever been. And, we're certainly very tiny in the scope of things. So, yeah, it is a difficult industry. But as your panel suggests, there's other industries that are extremely difficult as well. But, for me, it's probably not letting it define you. It's probably using it as a platform to do other things.
Yes. It's interesting about saying not letting it define you, because apparently the new movie about Alexander McQueen is worth seeing, and its director, I noticed today, says we shouldn't make icons of people. However much you achieve in fashion, we're still the same people, eating, sleeping, using the bathroom. The fashion industry loves creating icons.
Well, we're a creative industry, and we work with a product that I think a lot of people, don't understand so much. I mean, the trend culture. So from my point of view, I think we create icons out of a lot of industries. It's not just fashion, but the reality is that we are all just, we are all just people. But for me, I just keep going back to the way that we measure success. Just because we've made icons out of someone that's done particularly well in fashion, sometimes it doesn't mean they've, how do we measure success? Is it a financial platform? Is it the amount of joy that we have in our life, the contribution that we make to others? How do we do that? So, you look at someone like Kate Spade and the huge success, although she sold to Coach, didn't she, in 2007? So, and had gone on to create her own label, another label, Frances Valentine. But she obviously, to take her own life, wasn't in a happy space. So what does success look like for us all?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I'm assuming you've met designers no longer in vogue, no longer hearing the applause. Is it also that people of fragile temperaments can often be the most talented?
Oh, very much. But, as you know, I work out in the prisons as well, and there's a lot of stuff that happens out here too. But, I just think that people, sometimes people's mental health takes a turn that, becomes very difficult to kind of grapple with what the hell's happening. I don't know if it specifically belongs to the creative industries, but, there are a lot of people that do find themselves on pedestals for a whole lot of different reasons, and they don't cope with that very well. So I think the key to that is we've actually all got to find a balance. Because we're not these people that you put on these pedestals. So, and in a lot of ways, it's probably imposter syndrome. So for me, the key to a lot of the stuff that's grounded me has been being more than fashion, being a hell of a lot more than fashion, because it is a pretty narcissistic industry.
Nice to talk to you and get your point of view, Anna. Thank you. And before we go, the Miss America contest will now do away with swimsuits and evening gowns. It'll no longer judge contestants on their appearances, but on what makes you, you.
Okay.
Amen.
Isn't that called life? We don't need beauty pageants anymore then, do we at all?
We could enter.
Tim Watkin, Ellie Jones, thank you.
Kia ora, good evening, welcome to Checkpoint. I'm Sharon Brett Kelly in for John Campbell. Tonight on the programme, a lack of staff, incomplete data and a culture of holding back the resolution of claims. The Minister for EQC calls for immediate changes after a damning report into the organisation's culture. Also tonight, New Plymouth Stadium sponsor Yarrow the Bakers tell us they're devastated at news the stadium has been condemned. Housing New Zealand CEO Andrew Mackenzie fronts for the first time on flawed meth testing guidelines. But what does it mean for tenants wrongly evicted? Also tonight, Bella Vista homeowners await their fate. 200 people remain missing in Guatemala.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten aho. The author of a report considering ways to speed up the resolution of Canterbury earthquake claims says the Earthquake Commission couldn't tell her how many people are still waiting for their claims to be resolved. The government has released a report by the independent ministerial advisor Christine Stevenson into the Commission's handling of the remaining 3,500 claims from the 2010 and 2011 earthquakes. Christine Stevenson says she wanted reliable data about the exact number and status of unresolved claims, but the Commission could not provide that information.
I was disappointed because I was really keen to have a good segmentation of claims. I think if EQC can segment its claims and know what claims it has, it's going to be better able to deal with them.
Christine Stevenson has recommended a data quality group is established to focus on improving the records, and the Earthquake Commission has agreed to implement that change. The Taranaki Rugby Union is in a state of shock following the indefinite closure of Yarrow Stadium in New Plymouth due to earthquake risk. Geotechnical testing on the west stand has found the bank underneath it is unstable and a significant earthquake risk. The east stand was closed in December when it was found to be earthquake prone. The Taranaki Rugby Union's chief executive Jeremy Parkinson says the announcement about the stadium was a surprise.
We got summoned to an urgent meeting at 3:30 yesterday afternoon, my chairman and I, and it was, a heck of a shock out of the blue.
The New Plymouth District Council, which manages the venue, says its closure is hugely disappointing, but public safety comes first. The victims of a botched housing development are urging the City Council to use compassion when deciding what will happen to the houses. The council decides this evening what is next for the 21 homeowners in the Vista development who were evacuated in March due to safety concerns. The properties are now deemed too dangerous to live in. The houses managed to get council sign-off despite major construction defects, and residents met with the council today to ask that it buy their homes at the market value before the defects were found. One resident, Tony Mann, told the council it needs to consider the futures of the residents.
This whole process from start to finish has been a nightmare. I've lost total confidence in the council and would never enter into building again. A drastic change of systems and procedures need to happen. I hope today that your decision is made with morality and integrity.
Residents will be notified of the outcome this evening. Snow and slush is set to turn to ice as treacherous driving conditions continue in the deep south after a cold front swept through last night, closing roads and schools. Met Service says more settled weather is set for Otago and Southland from late tomorrow, but it's predicted to remain freezing. Tess Brunton reports.
All state highways have reopened in Otago and Southland, but warnings about snow and ice remain in place. And many local roads are still closed or reduced to one lane. In the Queenstown Lakes District, the council has told motorists to carry chains after up to 10 cars ended up in a ditch between Lake Hayes and Arrowtown shortly after midday. More snow is possible tonight, but forecasters say it is the cold air moving in behind the front which will pose the most problems. Met Service is warning of frost and icy conditions around the South Island until Saturday. In Dunedin, Tess Brunton.
Flooding and winter conditions are affecting several roads in Christchurch, and motorists are being urged to be careful. The Chinese state carrier Air China is to resume regular flights between Beijing and the North Korean capital, Pyongyang. It's the latest sign of a marked easing in tensions between the two countries, the BBC's Michael Bristow reports.
The Air China flights 3 times a week were one of the few direct links between North Korea and the outside world. They were suspended last November because of business reasons, the company said. The same explanation it's now given for their sudden resumption. But it's surely no coincidence that the flights were stopped when China was angry at North Korea for continuing its nuclear and missile tests. They resumed following 2 recent summits between the Chinese leader Xi Jinping and his North Korean counterpart Kim Jong-un, who's next week due to meet President Trump.
Michael Bristow reporting. Auckland Zoo's last 2 lions were put down today because of their declining health and quality of life. The pair, who are mother and daughter, were 19 and 17 years old. Emma Hatton reports.
Over the past few months, the mother lion's health had been declining. Zookeepers say Kura was losing weight and she was preparing to stand down as head of the pride. The daughter, Amira, was also put down as the zoo feared she would die of sadness without her mother. The zoo's carnivore team leader says the few times Kura had left Amira, she became highly anxious and upset, and the decision to euthanise them both at the same time was one of kindness.
Lions typically live until aged 15 in the wild and 17 in captivity. This is Emma Hatton.
It's 5 minutes past 5. Sport. The all-conquering Queensland Rugby League side of the past decade is barely recognisable ahead of tonight's opening State of Origin match after key retirements and a spate of injuries. In contrast, New South Wales have opted for a total clean-out in both philosophy and personnel, having won just one of the past 12 series. Each side has 11 debutants for tonight's match in Melbourne, which shapes as the most unpredictable in years. Queensland is without stars Cooper Cronk, Jonathan Thurston, Cameron Smith and Billy Slater, but coach Kevin Walters has been able to call on Greg Inglis, who's been in the side since 2006, to lead the team following Smith's retirement last month.
When he came into the side as a 18 or 19-year-old, he's just grown and matured so much, and I see the respect that he has, you know, amongst the playing group, more importantly, and I know how Greg's going to play, and he will lead from the front.
Kevin Walters. The Breakers have filled their first import slot for the next NBL season, signing American small forward Armani Moore. The 24-year-old former University of Tennessee player, who's played in Poland and Germany, has signed a one-year deal. The Breakers have contracted 9 players for next season and have 2 import spots still available. Former champions Maria Sharapova and Garbina Muguruza clash for a place in the semi-finals of the French Tennis Open tonight. While in the men's draw, 10-time champion Rafael Nadal is the heavy favourite to advance to the Final Four against Diego Schwartzman. That's the news.
Tonight on Night, Simon Morris continues his search for a decent return on investment at the movies. We have a window on the world of plants, more sentient than you might have thought. Melody Thomas looks at 21st century dating, and Ben Page explains why he rode his bicycle across the Canadian Arctic. Maybe he missed the bus.
And stay informed at the other end of the day. Join me for Lately, an hour-long show that includes the extended 10 p.m. news bulletin and is across music, the arts, politics, live events and current affairs. Keep up to date with Lately with Karen Hay, 10 to 11 weeknights on RNZ National.
Met service weather now through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Waitomo, including Coromandel Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Showers today, some heavy with hail and possible thunderstorms in the west. Mainly fine tomorrow, apart from showers persisting about Northland. Taranaki, Taumaranui and Taihape through to Wellington, also Gisborne to Wairarapa. Showers, some heavy with hail and snow to 500 metres for a time. Thunderstorms possible about Gisborne and Northern Hawke's Bay this evening. Nelson Buller and Westland, fine today, cloudy periods tomorrow with brief showers. Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine inland, but showers near the coast with snow above 300 metres. Widespread rain for a time overnight or in the morning, icy conditions inland. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, showers falling as snow above 200 metres at first, icy conditions inland. The Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with 1 or 2 showers. It's 8 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Kia ora, Katrina. I'm Sharon Brett Kelly in for John Campbell. The Minister in charge of the Earthquake Commission has called for immediate changes to the organisation in response to a damning report. The report says EQC staff have no confidence in their own data. The organisation needs to treat its customers with respect and honesty and needs to dramatically improve the way it communicates with them. The Minister Megan Woods says the report shows systemic problems and she now expects to see a major culture change. But where was EQC's CEO Sid Miller? Rachel Graham has more.
The report makes a number of recommendations which EQC has agreed to address immediately. These include hiring more staff, establishing a claimant reference group and making files available to homeowners on request, instead of forcing them to use the Official Information Act. Megan Woods says she expects to see claimants treated better by EQC staff.
The fact that there's a recommendation that there needs to be a change, that people are treated with empathy, that there is a transparency and that they have a clear indication of what's going to happen with their claim, indicates that that hasn't always been the case. It is the clear expectation contained within the recommendations that there has to be a leadership and culture change within the organisation to ensure that people are treated in that way.
Another change is to create a data quality group within EQC to locate the physical files, sort them, check them and capture all the key data. In May, EQC admitted that it had missed 1,000 of its open claims, and in fact the figure was around 3,600 cases still to work through. The report was put together by independent ministerial advisor Christine Stevenson, who says she has considerable concern about the lack of confidence in the EQC data, including from its own staff. She says this included their inability to provide her with reliable data.
I was disappointed because I was really keen to have a good segmentation of claims. I think if EQC can segment its claims and know what claims it has, it's going to be better able to deal with them. Since I completed my report, you may be aware that another roughly 1,000 claims have come to EQC's attention, and very disappointing.
Megan Woods says there are also a number of recommendations or issues which will need more work and analysis before she can make a decision on them. These include a suggestion to give EQC a new power to settle what are described as on-sold claims, homes which were purchased under the impression all repairs had been identified and completed. Christchurch homeowner Georgina Hannafin bought her Linwood home in 2013 under the assumption all earthquake repairs had been made. But the house was destabilised, with cracks and visible damage only patched up. She says the report and its recommendations aren't likely to fix the bigger problems at EQC.
The root of the problem at EQC is they seem to have a strategy of deny, delay, defer. Communication is absolutely lacklustre. You can send an email requesting information or even requesting confirmation of something you've discussed on the phone, and you won't hear back at all. Constantly chasing them for responses or replies. There's no integrity.
Insurance advocate Ali Jones, whose home is another of the on-sold properties, says the report is progress, but she says to solve all of the problems at EQC, the organisation needs to be taken apart and then put back together.
I think what we're trying to do, and this report probably highlights it, is that we are trying to save a lame duck. The entire system needs deconstructing and reconstructing. Now, whether you do that bit by bit, whether you don't do that because that would just be a disaster, I don't know, but it is clear that there are systemic flaws in the process and procedures that need to change.
Megan Woods says some of the issues which require a policy change will go to Cabinet for a decision by the end of July. She also expects some of the issues raised will be looked into further as part of the inquiry into the EQC Act, which is currently underway. The CEO of EQC, Sid Miller, was unavailable for comment today. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Rachel Graham.
And we'll hear more from EQC Minister Megan Woods after 6 tonight. Taranaki's flagship stadium has been condemned after geotechnical testing showed the bank under its west stand is a significant earthquake risk. Testing on New Plymouth's Yarrow Stadium was commissioned after a November report found the east stand was earthquake prone. The closure comes just 10 weeks before the start of the Mitre 10 Cup, leaving the Taranaki Bulls without a home base, and Yarrow's the Bakers, who have been a naming sponsor of the stadium for the past 15 years, without a stadium to sponsor. General Manager of Yarrow's the Bakers, Russell Gukert, told our producer Bridget Burt a short time ago he's gutted.
Devastating for me personally, for the Yarrow family and for the Yarrow's company, and I'm sure it's devastating also for the Taranaki Rugby Union, the New Plymouth District Council, the Taranaki Regional Council, which owns the facility, I understand, and for the larger community that not only goes there to watch rugby, but there's also club rugby on a Saturday, and we've had the likes of the Warriors, the Phoenix, and also cultural events have taken place or do take place there.
When did you find out about this?
We received a phone call from the commercial manager of the rugby union at approximately 10 a.m. this morning. And then we received another call from the New Plymouth District Council telling us the same story.
What does that do to your 3-year agreement of as a chief sponsor?
I have no idea. I guess that's to be decided in the future.
Do you have any idea, Russell, how long a solution might take to refine?
I'm not an engineer, but when the other stand was condemned, they were talking about if it has to be knocked down completely, I think it would be like a 3 to 4 year project and maybe around the $50 million mark. So this grandstand does not quite have the same infrastructure in it, but I'm sure it would be an expensive exercise, and it would take probably a similar amount of time.
Have you spoken to the Yarrow family about this decision?
I've spoken to Rosaline Yarrow, which is the wife of, well, she's one of the directors, the wife of John. Yeah, we're all in the same boat. Bearing in mind that the company and the company and the Yarrow family have sponsored the stadium for the last 15 years, and also the stand that was condemned today, the Nolan Milver Yarrow stand, was an additional sponsorship put up by Mr. and Mrs. Noel Yarrow, who are obviously no longer here anymore, so that's pretty sad.
It's like a death in the family, is it not?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm a sports junkie, so yes, it is.
Where are you going to go watch your games?
Oh, I've got no idea. No idea, because the rugby union have obviously been working their butts off for the last 3 or 4 months when they knew they only had one grandstand, to build the new infrastructure about, looking after the corporates, changing rooms, car parking, all that sort of stuff, which just went out the window, I guess, in a matter of one report, and I guess they had a meeting about it, and yeah, that's where we are. Really.
And that's the General Manager of Yarrow's The Bakers, Russell Gukit. A new round of evacuations is underway in Guatemala as the Fuego volcano began a second eruption over the last few hours. Meanwhile, first funerals have taken place for the more than 70 people killed by the violent eruption over the weekend. 200 people are missing. Search and rescue operations are continuing. The volcano released a 5-mile stream of lava, a pyroclastic cloud and ash that fell over nearby Guatemala City, as well as across many smaller towns and villages. The BBC's Ali Makbul has been surveying the damage.
The volcano may be shrouded in smoke, but it now gives away little of the sudden, catastrophic violence it wrought here. With more eruptions feared following further sporadic explosions at the volcano, a frantic recovery effort goes on. Well, we're going in with one rescue team as close as we can get to the volcano. They've been digging for days now into the ash, but there are still so many bodies to be found. As we went in, we saw a recovery team coming out. They'd been trying to find survivors, but the only living things they could bring out this time were abandoned chickens. And this is why. The entire village of El Rodeo was smothered in a thick blanket of burning volcanic ash. In some homes, entire families were buried alive. The land was scarred and suffocated by lava and ash. The assault from the volcano came so fast, it's no wonder so many simply had no chance of escape. Survivors who did manage to flee for their lives have been left traumatized. Thousands are now in makeshift shelters. 35 members of the extended Lopez Pozuelo family fled as lava, ash flows and debris engulfed their town. But 5 of their relatives didn't make it, including Francisco's brother and 2 grandnieces, aged 12 and 14.
The
place is completely destroyed, he says. I don't believe any of them survived because the homes are totally buried under the ashes. There's no more space in the morgue for more bodies. As night falls, they remember the dead and those presumed dead. Even when bodies are found, so few victims have as yet been identified. One rescuer said when he did find bodies, after hours digging in ash, they often looked like statues, so hard to recognize.
And that was Ali Makbul in Guatemala. A patient in Tauranga Hospital says she could hear nurses arguing and swearing while she lay bleeding in a bed. Last week, RNZ brought you an investigation into allegations of widespread bullying amongst staff at Tauranga Hospital. The Bay of Plenty DHB, which runs the hospital, says it is firmly committed to an anti-bullying culture. But RNZ has received a new allegation that the alleged bullying is affecting patient care. Marva Inoka from The Wireless reports.
Diane Mark was 38 weeks pregnant when she was rushed to Tauranga Hospital in May last year, bleeding heavily and terrified for her baby's life. She says the care she received wasn't good enough. The nurses who should have been looking after her were arguing amongst themselves.
While they were trying to figure out what was going on, my baby's heart rate kept dropping, mine was rising, and the nurses were bickering amongst themselves about who was going to do what job and who was going to get the surgeons and who was going to take me to this place and that place.
Ms. Mark says she and her husband were appalled the nurses were arguing in front of them in her room.
That's not my job. I'm not doing that by myself. Someone needs to come with me. And then I heard someone go, "Oh, for fuck's sakes, I'll do it," which isn't ideal as I'm lying there bleeding out.
The experience has made her wary of ever going back.
I could see the nurses bullying each other. I could see, I've seen some of the doctors, the way they talk to nurses, and other times I've been to the hospital. I've also heard stories from my friends who go to the hospital, and my sister's actually studying to be a nurse, and I don't want her to go to that hospital if that's what's going on.
Bay of Plenty DHB CEO Helen Mason says she's sorry to hear the patient felt the care was inadequate, and patients should contact the hospital directly if they have concerns. But it's not just patients who are worried about Tauranga Hospital's culture. A nurse who asked not to be named believes bullying is a long-standing issue. She started work for the Bay of Plenty DHB in 2003, and it was going on then.
I think there was a culture there already when I started, and this is why I think that it's been allowed to thrive, because I personally don't believe this is anything new.
She says when she noticed a group of nurses belittling and undermining a colleague over a period of time, she stood up for him, but that made her a target. She says at one stage the same group of nurses discovered a personal issue of hers and started discussing it at work.
Without doubt, it was the most traumatic experience I've ever been through. I've been qualified now as a mental health nurse and a general nurse for 23 years, and I thank God I've never encountered anything since.
During a period of sick leave, she says a rumour was spread that she had terminal cancer, and the nurses continued to target her when she got back to work.
This involved things like people turning the desks, like in a shared office. 3 of the 5 turned the desk against the wall because they didn't want to look at me. They cut my image out of photographs and pinned them on the door. They stopped talking when I walked into a room. They wouldn't go out on clinical visits with me.
She says the bullying affected her mental and physical health.
I lost 30 kilograms in weight over that, probably over a 12-month period. I couldn't sleep, and you have to go back because I had 2 young daughters at the time.
She put her concerns to HR, which carried out an investigation. But she says she was told her claims could neither be proven nor disproven. She moved to the South Island and took up another nursing job in 2006, but is horrified at recent revelations about the hospital's culture. The Bay of Plenty DHB declined to comment on this case, saying continuing media coverage of alleged bullying has caused distress for the families, friends and former work colleagues of those concerned. The Minister of Health, David Clark, declined to be interviewed. The Minister of Workplace Relations, Ian Les Galloway, told RNZ he has asked WorkSafe to have a greater focus on mental health issues and on workplace bullying. The regulator has received about 100 complaints about WorkSafe bullying over the past 4 years, but has only investigated 9, and none have resulted in an employer being prosecuted. The Minister says he's satisfied that WorkSafe has the resources it needs to improve its services without requiring extra money. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi pō ko Mawari Nuka aho.
The victims of a botched housing development in Tauranga have made an impassioned plea to the City Council to take responsibility for signing off on what's being described as sloppy building work. The Council decides this evening what is next for the 21 homeowners in the Bella Vista development who were evacuated in March due to safety concerns. Eva Corlett filed this report from Tauranga.
The properties, now deemed too dangerous to live in, managed to get council sign-off despite major construction defects. Emotional residents met with councillors this morning to make a plea: buy their homes for the market value before the defects were found. Residents Andrew and Chloe Stewart described the excitement of building their first home.
Through that process, after we sat down, we did things like choosing our colours, our carpets, putting personal input into things like our joinery and just making it our own. And as a first home buyer,
we worked hard to be able to get to this point, to be able to enjoy that.
But Bella Vista residents' dreams of decorating, starting families and investing in their properties were thwarted after their homes were condemned in March and everyone was ordered out. Resident Deegan Prodger says the evacuation has taken its toll.
It's put a strain on my marriage, our family dynamics, our jobs, and for my daughter who's schooling. Leaving our house so abruptly and moving around traumatised my daughter so much that when we finally got back home temporarily, she said, "I'm not going to unpack my bag because the man's just going to move us again."
Another resident, solo mother Sasha Tyrell, says it's been a big stress for her 2-year-old daughter to be shunted between hotels and rental accommodation.
Over the last 3 months, she has been admitted to hospital once. There have been 2 trips to the doctors. She has regressed in her sleeping and rarely sleeps solidly through a night anymore, something that she had started doing from about 8 months old. Now she wakes most nights crying and unsettled. Most likely because she doesn't recognise where she is waking up.
Some residents described having to cram into their extended families' overcrowded homes. Others talked of employment woes and relationship breakdowns because of the saga. Resident Jenny Coffey told the council the families feel robbed.
We want the council to buy our property back off us at full market value as if no defects. This will allow us to buy an equivalent property in the same area. Anything less than this would be an insult to us. We have been handed this issue through no fault of our own. We did not ask for this. All we did was buy a house and put our trust in the process.
Residents Colin and Jan-Marie Mills said it's only fair the council also pays back homeowners the money they shelled out for consents.
That's what most other businesses have to do. If I hadn't prepaid for the service, you wouldn't have been getting the money out of me, because you didn't deliver.
This afternoon, the council has been deliberating over 4 options, including buying the properties, fixing them or issuing appropriate notices. The results of an independent investigation overseen by Paul Heath QC into the council's responsibilities and possible failings while handling the build will also be considered. Homeowner Tony Mann urged the council to use compassion in its decision-making.
This whole process from start to finish has been a nightmare. I've lost total confidence in the council and would never enter into building again. A drastic change of systems and procedures need to happen. I hope today that your decision is made with morality and integrity.
2 families have filed legal proceedings against the Tauranga City Council. Ms Coffey said other families would consider joining the class action depending on the council's decision. I Tauranga mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Eva Colette tēnei.
A Tolaga Bay family who escaped a flash flood by climbing on their roof have been reunited with their dog almost 3 days after he was swept away in his kennel. Nina Maraki, her partner Paul Tekira and their granddaughter Ruby Rose were rescued by helicopter as floodwaters and slash inundated their East Coast home in the early hours of Monday morning. But they could only watch as their beloved family pet was swept away. Nina told me her family had been forced to leave everything behind.
We've lost everything, however, we've still got ourselves, and honestly, we just want to make a point of thanking everyone. They've just been so kind, and we're just so grateful for everything. We really are.
Nina, have you been able to go back to your home?
No, I won't. No, not right now.
You just can't face it at the moment?
No.
Has Paul been back?
Yes, he's been back this morning. We found our dog. Because our dog was stuck in the kennel and the kennels got all washed away, and our dog, we saw him in the distance when we were on the roof, and he was on some logs, and then we lost sight of him, and Paul's been back in, and he was inside the house.
And has Paul told you what it's like at the house?
Yeah, he has. He says it's just such a mess. He said everything is just yeah, just lost. But it's all good, honestly.
Are you insured?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
People have done a lot for you since the weekend. People have come to help you.
Yes, of course, and they want to, and it's just so very humbling.
What kind of
grateful.
And what kind of things are people doing for you?
People are like offering like their cars, their vehicles, like offering money and like, you know, giving roasts and clothing for Ruby and myself and you know, like just so generous, just wanting to just take us out for lunch and just, you know, just whānau, just being there with us and friends and strangers. Like we're honestly grateful.
Tell us about your dog. I mean, where do you think he went? And he turned up at your property.
I don't even know how he would have got back to the house. But for him to be in the house, like, that's just amazing, because there was just water and just the whole river and just water everywhere. So, oh gosh, he's unreal.
But he was in his kennel at the time. He was he?
He was in the kennel, yes.
So he was carried away in his kennel.
He was carried away. Like, I reckon the kennel would have just got busted. And we saw him sitting up on some logs and that, and then we lost sight of him. So he would have got out of the kennel. Obviously, it would have just got washed away and busted out. So yeah.
So you saw him being carried away on the log as you were sitting on top of your house?
On top of the roof, yeah. Yes.
And you thought he was gone forever?
Yeah, we just real broken. And Ruby Rose, she was yesterday, she was hoping that Tor was safe and he was all right, and she said she loved him, but yeah.
And that was Tolaga Bay resident Nina Maraki speaking this afternoon. Coming up, Housing New Zealand CEO Andrew McKenzie fronts for the first time on flawed meth testing guidelines. But what does it mean for tenants wrongly evicted? The first train from Napier to Wairoa in 6 years. And we meet New Zealand's longest serving Tupperware consultant. We'd love your feedback. Don't forget you can text us on 2101 and you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. But first, here's Katrina Batten with the headlines.
The author of a report on Canterbury earthquake claims says EQC had no data on how many people are still waiting for their claims to be resolved. The independent ministerial advisor, Christine Stevenson, has examined the Commission's handling of the 3,500 claims still outstanding. She's recommended a data quality group be set up to focus on improving the records, and the Earthquake Commission has agreed to do that. A former nurse at Tauranga Hospital says she felt so bullied by colleagues that it was the most traumatic experience of her life. The nurse worked at the hospital for 3 years from 2003 and says she felt increasingly mistreated by colleagues who ostracised her. She says she's appalled at recent allegations of bullying being investigated by RNZ. The Taranaki Rugby Union is shocked by the closure of New Plymouth's Yarrow Stadium. Geotechnical testing on the west stand has found the bank below it is a significant earthquake risk. The east stand was closed in December when it was also found to be earthquake prone. The stadium will be closed indefinitely. The Transport Agency is warning motorists in Otago and Southland to brace for another icy start tomorrow after snow and freezing temperatures made roads dangerous today. It says drivers in Otago and inland Southland should be ready for black ice tomorrow, and motorists need to slow down in the early morning. Ice-prone highways will have grit spread on them but will still be dangerous, the agency says. Meanwhile, flooding and winter conditions are affecting several roads in Christchurch, and motorists there are urged to be careful. Primary school teachers have been offered pay rises ranging from 7% over 3 years for experienced teachers to nearly 15% for new teachers. The Teachers' Union, the Educational Institute, says it's taking the offer to its members to consider, but says the offer is less than the 16% it says is needed. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Kia ora, Katrina. Turning to business news now with Nona Peltier. Hello, Nona. The fish farmer King Salmon is expecting to meet or beat profit expectations over the next couple of years, even though it's had a fall in production.
Yes, it's surprising because you would think if with, they didn't have as many fish farmed because of the warmer climate in the Marlborough Sound. So the water was warmer than they expected and they didn't produce as many fish, but they were clever enough to go out into their markets and do a fairly good job of selling their premium fish, and so got a better margin. And so in the end they improved their profits for this financial year. So they're going to make at the upper end or slightly above their guidance range, and for the following year it's going to even be better again. So even though this has affected their production, now they are looking at changing things up. And I spoke with Grant Rosewarne, who talked a little bit about some of the factors that were involved in what happened in the Marlborough Sound. So we can have a little bit of listen to that.
What we saw this last summer just gone, we don't think that was climate change. We think climate change is in the mix. But according to our calculations, that shouldn't have happened until about 2050, sometime around then. So in our view, that was an unusual peak weather event made a little bit worse by climate change. Along the way, we will also be breeding our fish to be able to tolerate higher temperatures. And we also hope to swap some of our low-flow, warmer sites for cooler, deeper sites with a higher current as well. And that will also assist us if that comes off.
Interesting, they're breeding their fish so that they can withstand higher temperatures.
Yes, I guess, well, they're hoping that this isn't climate change, because if it is, it's a little bit ahead of the curve. They're hoping for, like, say, 2050, when they're going to have to deal with this. So you'd want to give yourself quite a lot of lead time. He's not sure if it is climate change. They don't think so. They think it's a one-time event. So we did have a much warmer summer, and those temperatures definitely made a difference in the Sounds. And of course, they're looking to get that cooler, deeper farm. We'll see what happens with that. They're working with the government on that.
Nona, Sky Television's Fan Pass service, it's been recently made available to more users. Sorry, you'll have to tell me what Fan Pass is and what Sky's been doing.
Well, there you go, Sharon. I guess you're not a big sport fan, are you?
No.
Well, anyways, they have their product called Fan Pass, which basically gives subscribers just the sport programs, and you can apply for it through Sky. It costs about $56 a month, and you can then use it on multiple devices. They're offering this deal, though, for just mobile users, and that's quite interesting. They're trying to expand their subscriber base. They've been losing customers for some time, so giving it to mobile-only customers, so you can only use it on your mobile phone, you'll be able to still access sport, and it will renew every month unless you cancel it. So for $16 as opposed to, say, $56, although there is a big difference naturally. And just on Friday, they did a deal with Spark too. Spark's offering Fan Pass for $30, and that's comparable to what Sky is offering. Now, in that case, you have to be a subscriber for 12 months, and Spark is offering it a discount. So they did a deal with Sky, and that's quite remarkable because they have been sparring with each other for some time over access to sport content. So it's a changing world, and I guess Sky is hoping that that's going to lift their subscriber numbers, and the market liked it.
Did they indeed?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, their share price rose 0.4%, which isn't, pretty good, because earlier they were a little down, and their share price has been knocked quite a lot. Every time they announce that their subscriber numbers have fallen, so does their share price. Now, NZ King Salmon, it rose almost 1%, but what's really amazing is that our market soared today to a new record close. We went up nearly 2/3%. That's 56 points to 8,813. That's a new record. Oh. Yeah, it's quite a bit more than what we had previously, the middle of last month, 8,766. That's a big hike. Fisher and Paykel there helped the market up with quite a strong rise. And our dollar is also very strong at the moment. We're at 70.4 US cents, 91.94 Australian. And that's really close to 92 cents, which is a barrier. I guess we'll see if we get up that high. And 52.5 pence.
Very good. Thank you, Nona. That's our business reporter, Nona Peltier. Well, Housing New Zealand says tenants kicked out of their homes over flawed meth testing guidelines may have their costs repaid. The boss of the country's largest landlord fronted up for the first time today since a report by the government's top scientists last week found meth residue posed no risk to health at all. That's seen hundreds of tenants needlessly evicted by Housing New Zealand and more than $100 million of taxpayers' money spent on unnecessary decontamination. Catherine Hutton reports.
Housing New Zealand has repeatedly refused to comment since Sir Peter Gluckman's report on meth testing was released more than a week ago. Today, its Chief Executive Andrew Mackenzie faced the media for the first time.
We certainly apologise to all those people who've had their lives disrupted as we've shifted them out of their homes.
He says tenants kicked out of their homes because of the tests may be repaid the costs they incurred due to their evictions.
In the last 3 years, there are about 300 people have been evicted from our homes where the methamphetamine was a factor in that eviction. Many of those people were then rehoused, but some of them weren't.
And how many people have been blacklisted from your homes?
So I could not tell you the precise number.
The Drug Foundation's Chief Executive Ross Bell questions how accurate that figure is and says people need to remember that's 300 households rather than individuals.
It was the practice of Housing New Zealand to put on the street, to evict from their homes people who were likely to have issues around drug use and other health issues. And this is the New Zealand's social housing landlord of last resort, and they were destroying the lives of very vulnerable New Zealanders.
Ross Bell questions how the government will now compensate those vulnerable people, given that many don't have a lot of resources to have their voices heard.
This is not a group of people who have some kind of union or some kind of organisation over them who can do this on their behalf. The property investors who have been harmed have their own body. The insurance industry have their own council. But there isn't a single voice, there isn't a single organisation here who is able to act on behalf of those very vulnerable people and to seek redress for them.
The government has now asked Housing New Zealand for a report on the issue, but documents seen by RNZ suggest the enormity of the task Housing New Zealand faces. It took its first case involving methamphetamine to the Tenancy Tribunal in mid-2010, yet it didn't start recording the number of meth applications it had before the tribunal until 6 years later. And not all evictions went to the tribunal. In the year to the end of June 2016, the agency received reports of meth in 1,275 properties. But the coordinator of the Tenants Protection Association Auckland, Angela Maynard, says paying compensation to those who were kicked out because of meth isn't impossible.
That a lot of those people will still be in the system. Some of them will be beneficiaries, so they'll be able to track them through WINS and AMSD. So I'm sure if they want to, they can track them. There's also, neighbours they can ask. People will know where other people are. It's not that hard. This is a country with a small population.
But Ross Bell says that's assuming that the government has a data system that allows them to push a button and a list appears. He warns people could fall through the cracks and they don't have the resources to champion their cause. For Checkpoint, Catherine Hutton.
And Housing New Zealand says in a statement it will take 6 weeks to complete its report. It says part of the work will involve checking various databases. One of these may be held by another government agency. Well, the first train to travel on the Napier to Wairoa line in 6 years is being heralded as a new spring for KiwiRail. After storm damage closed the track in 2012, the line is reopening thanks to $5 million in funding from the government's Provincial Growth Fund. And while the full track won't be in use until November, the first trip on the repaired line to Eskdale is being celebrated as the start of bigger things to come. Here's our Hawke's Bay reporter Anusha Bradley.
It had all the pomp and ceremony fit for a king, but it was the Regional Economic Development Minister Shane Jones, along with a load of crushed rock, that was the precious cargo carried by the first train to travel on the repaired track. Wearing a personalised high-vis jacket and shiny new work boots bought just for the occasion, Mr Jones admits his graceful descent from the train was not left to luck.
To be honest with you, they did make me practice up the road out of earshot and eyesight of your good selves.
After an official blessing and a serenade by the Ratana Brass Band, the train was off. While this train was only going 15 kilometres up the line to the rural settlement of Eskdale, Mr Jones says it marks a significant milestone.
Oh, well, it's symbolic. We're laying down the foundation stones for a brighter future for KiwiRail.
You talked a lot about how this was the spring for KiwiRail.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt, the Tuawhenua Provincial Growth Fund has a significant commitment to grow KiwiRail, because this government has the financial capital and the political will to turn their commercial proposals into an economic and political reality.
The money's coming from the $1 billion a year Provincial Growth Fund. That's part of the coalition agreement between Labour and New Zealand First. The Napier to Wairoa line was closed by KiwiRail on December 4th, 2012, following storm damage. Wayne Kempton drove that last train back to Napier and remembers it well.
Yeah, it was a pretty emotional day. Yeah, I always thought we'd go back there. I always thought eventually we would go back sometime. And the day we go back to Gisborne, I can drive out of Tunnel 23 and oversee the beach loop, would be even better.
However, Shane Jones isn't sure that'll happen anytime soon.
And as much as I would like to wave my political wand at this stage, I'll be guided by KiwiRail. And I thought, well, if we could achieve a bit of credibility by getting back to Wairoa, and then not give up on Gisborne, but at the same time not make a arbitrary political decision, because at the end of the day KiwiRail have to run the business. But the pūtea is there in the event that a suitable case is submitted by KiwiRail.
KiwiRail's Chief Executive Peter Reedy says it's already spent $3 million of government money getting the line to Wairoa up to scratch.
Within 12 months, we're looking to get 2 to 3 trains a week. We're going to set up a marshalling yard, forestry marshalling yard up in Wairoa. So we're going to lease the land up there, set that up, work with the forestry owners, work with the port. So within 12 months, we'll see more logs on the trains coming through the port.
And Peter Reedy says this means more jobs.
Yeah, we're actually, today we're talking to the Minister of Social Development. There will be some jobs we'll be looking at, and we're talking to the Minister of Social Development right across New Zealand for job opportunities as we open up, because this is just the start. With the Provincial Growth Fund, as Minister Jones has said, there's a lot more to come, and we've got a big team working on this to open up more regional economic activity.
Once it's completed, KiwiRail estimates the reinstated track will take 5,500 logging trucks off the road each year. In Napier for Checkpoint, Anusha Bradley.
The lawyer for the owners of a Northland hotel says they're standing by their claims that a woman left her baby outside their venue while she gambled. This follows the chief executive of gaming trust Pub Charity, Martin Cheer, casting doubt on the owners of the Romany Masonic hotel's claims, saying they reviewed CCTV footage from the gaming lounge and found no evidence to say the incident happened. Pub Charity says it turned the machines off on the 21st of May because the couple had failed to bank cash from the pokies on time. But the lawyer acting for the hotel's owners, Glenn Dick and Lana Turnbull, says his clients maintain the machines were deactivated after the incident, and they're adamant a baby was left alone. Reporter Katie Scotchett spoke to their barrister David Garrett a short time ago.
The machines were not deactivated for at least a week after this incident. Secondly, there were 2 instances of late banking. In my view, both perfectly explainable. One was a misunderstanding between Glenn and Lana over who was supposed to do it, so it was 24 hours late. And the other was Lana injured herself, and the banking was done 36 or 48 hours late. The Department of Internal Affairs, despite Mr Chair's best efforts, it would appear, don't seem very interested in pursuing the matter, but if they do wish to, Glenn and Lana are quite happy to cooperate in any way.
Why would Pub Charity make these claims if they weren't true?
Well, that's a very good question, and the only conclusion I can come to is that they're concerned that other low-income communities, such as this one, will have the same reaction that this community has had to Glenn and Lana, which I have seen personally for myself today, has been wholeheartedly supportive, and the pub charity empire might be at some risk. That's the only thing I can think of, frankly.
And Pub Charity have said that they have looked through footage from the hotel and, can't see the incident that Glenn has described.
Right. Well, I've actually looked today myself. I'm physically at the pub right now, and I've looked as soon as I got here at the room that was the gaming room and the location of the cameras. The cameras were focused on each. There were two cameras, one focused on one bank of machines, the other focused on the other. The cameras cannot have seen the baby outside, and Glenn showed me where that baby was in the baby capsule. In fact, they can't even see inside the bar. So I've not seen this video myself, but frankly, I'm not sure what it could possibly show.
Well, Pub Charity have said that they didn't even see any, form of conversation between Glenn and the woman that supposedly left her baby outside. There was no conversation in the video. So why would they say
Glenn and Lana both adamantly deny that that's the case. Glenn has physically showed me. The first thing I did when I got here this morning was ask him to give me the tour, show me where the gaming room was, show me where he had found the baby. There's no cameras out there. And Glenn's explanation to me seems perfectly plausible, frankly.
So they completely stick by their story in terms of the baby and the money that was owing?
Yes, they do. And there is some money owing, and that's $493 owed to them by Pub Charity, which is, I'm told, now overdue, and they'd like it paid.
And what is that $493 for?
I'm told that's commission on apparently the hosts of these machines, if you like, receive a 16% commission on the turnover that goes through them. And the entire takings are banked, and a percentage, which I'm told is 16%, is paid to the hosts.
And that was Barrister David Garrett, the lawyer for Glenn, Dick and Lana Turnbull, who own the Romany Masonic Hotel. Well, New Zealand's longest-serving Tupperware consultant reckons she sold millions of dollars in products over 40 years, including more than $17,000 in sales in 1 week. 70-year-old Shirley Rust, who sells Tupperware in New Plymouth, says her favourite part of the job is reorganising pantries with different sized containers known as modulars. She says her mother also sold Tupperware, and she told me times have changed since her very first party.
Well, 40 years ago, I was new to Taranaki, and I had 4 little children, and I was very, very shy. And when I approached a lady about wanting to sell Tupperware, she went back to my manager and they laughed because they didn't know how a shy mouse could try and sell Tupperware. So it made it quite difficult, but I had a streak of determination and knew the product. And so they allowed me to start, and it built my confidence that I never had. And then after about 12 months, I was offered the opportunity of becoming a Tupperware manager, and so I worked towards that, and then for over 30 years, I had a lovely team of ladies working under me.
What were those first parties like, going into those homes back then? Because that was in the height of Tupperware, wasn't it, when everybody wanted to buy it?
They were quite different, and you got a lot of the mums sort of coming out for an evening to get away from the children, and that sort of thing, which was really, really good. Yeah, so they were different to what they are now, because people are more business-like. They've got a lot less time, and they want to come and just have a look at the product and then go home.
And is it different going into people's homes these days? Do you still have those parties in other people's homes?
Yes, you do. You still have those parties, and I love that thing. We're finding things are changing a little bit with modern technology, moving away a little bit from that personal contact, which I really, really miss, and I'm struggling a little bit with that. You know, like a lot of it's done online now, and online parties, and I still prefer the personal contact with my customers.
What have been your big sellers over the years?
My big sellers are the modulars, the pantry containers, because it's something that I will do for people. Like I will go and give a customer a free quote on how much it would cost for her to deck her whole pantry out in the modulars. Then I order the Tupperware, go back to her place, label them, put her food into the containers and have it looking absolutely perfect, and a very satisfied customer who often says to me, if you didn't do that for me, I would never have got round to it.
And do you still do that now, Shirley? You take the modulars into people's kitchens and you put all their food into it and just rearrange their cupboards?
That's right, I do. Yes, I do. And people sort of say, gosh, you know, that's time consuming and you don't charge, but to me it is so rewarding.
And how much would that set me back, Shirley, if I got you into my house? I could do with that, but how much would it cost?
It probably, well, on an average, say in a new home these days, you're getting pretty close to $1,000. Some can be less, some are more. Sometimes I'll have a customer say to me, look, I've only got $500 spare, so then I would do my very best for that amount of money. So I tend to work in with their financial situations.
What's been your most memorable Tupperware party?
Now, do you want horrible ones or good ones?
Well, shall we start with the horrible one?
All right. One day I was out in this farming area of Okato doing holding a morning party. I had just finished demonstrating the Tupperware and everybody were just starting to fill out their orders when there was a cry from the door of my hostess's husband. The hostess went to the door, instantly fainted. Fortunately, we had two nurses at the party. He had cut himself a artery with a circular saw. They attended to him, rushed him to hospital, and I was left with blood and Tupperware.
Oh my goodness!
And that Tupperware party, we believe today, saved his life. So, and I still sold Tupperware. People felt sorry for me, I think.
You sold it on the day.
On the day, yes, people sort of phoned, some of them that had gone phoned through their orders later on. Another interesting one, a very wet winter's day, I was holding a morning party and there was a lot of naughty children at this party, so it was quite difficult. And one of the little children carried in this very pregnant cat, and one of the kittens fell out on the floor. So the hostess picked up the cat, took her into the laundry, put her in a big box, and proceeded to produce her kittens while all these naughty children watched her, and our Tupperware party went on smoothly.
Well, that's so kind of a happy Tupperware party story, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's a couple of real funny ones, yes.
How much have you sold over the 40 years, Shirley?
I can't answer that. We've tried to work it out. There was a number of years that I sold $100,000 per year. Wow. Have you any idea, John? I was just asking John. It would be in the millions, yeah.
Wow.
But I don't know how much it would be. It would be a lot of Tupperware.
And it's been a good earner for you, Shirley?
Yes. After 12 months, I became a manager, and so you've got that income as well. And it's been a great income, and it's enabled us to go on cruises, which we love, and the flexible hours have worked very well with my family.
And that was New Zealand's longest-serving Tupperware consultant, Shirley Rust. Now, coming up after 6 o'clock tonight, EQC Minister Megan Woods joins us to discuss the changes she wants implemented at EQC after the release of a damning report today. And the CEO of Taranaki Rugby has a team but nowhere for them to play after Yarrow Stadium was condemned today. Fashion designer Kate Spade, renowned for her shoes and handbags, has been found dead at the age of 55. Katrina will be reading the news very shortly, but don't forget you can give your feedback in all sorts of ways here. You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batt in Aho. The author of a report looking at ways to speed up the resolution of Canterbury earthquake claims says the Earthquake Commission couldn't tell her how many outstanding claims they had. The government today released a report by independent ministerial advisor Christine Stevenson into the Commission's handling of 3,500 claims from the 2010 and 2011 earthquakes that have still not been resolved. Christine Stevenson says she wanted reliable data about the exact number and status of unresolved claims, but the Earthquake Commission couldn't give her that information. She says EQC would be better able to deal with its claims if it had better management of its data. The Commission has agreed to implement the recommendation and establish a group focused on improving its record. A $2 million recovery fund to get the earthquake-prone Yarrow Stadium in New Plymouth through the next 3 years may be lost now the stadium has been shut indefinitely. In April, the Taranaki Regional and New Plymouth District Councils approved the funding for temporary facilities so the stadium could keep operating after its east stand was closed in December. Today it was revealed the west stand is also earthquake-prone and the venue was closed. A stadium trustee, Mike Neild, says it's unclear how much of the $2 million will be recovered. Authorities in Guatemala have revealed nearly 200 people are missing following this week's eruption of the Fuego volcano. 75 people have been confirmed dead. There have been fresh eruptions sparking further evacuations and sending rescue workers scrambling for cover. The BBC's Will Grant is in the affected area.
The tiny community of El Rodeo, high on the mountain slope, will never be the same. Some lost their homes, others their entire families. Buried beneath the ash are lives and livelihoods. Few who return to this village will find they've been spared the grief. The emergency services are working around the clock, some literally until they drop, but they are struggling to cope. The disaster has left a trail of destruction that will take months to overcome in what is already one of the poorest countries in the Americas.
Will Grant reporting. The Educational Institute is disappointed with a pay offer that would give experienced teachers half the pay rise of new teachers. The union says the Education Ministry has offered to increase new teachers' pay by nearly 15% over 3 years, and other teachers would get nearly 7%. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
The union says about 86% of teachers would get the lower increase of 2.2 to 2.6% a year for 3 years. The pay rate for teachers in their first 3 years of teaching would increase 4.3 to 4.7% a year, taking their starting salary from $49,600 to $56,600. The union says the offer assumes people considering a career look only at starting pay rates and not at what they will earn in later years. It says the offer falls short of the 16% the union was seeking over a 2-year term. Ko John Gerritsen, TNA.
The chair of a Northland marae says they feel violated by plans to build the country's biggest chicken farm on neighbouring land. Tegel Foods is seeking resource consent to farm 9 million chickens a year on land next to Kapehu Marae, south of Dargaville. Tegel are holding a hui in Auckland this evening to discuss their plans, but the chair of Kapehu Marae, Margaret Mutu, says they were not told about the meeting. Dr Mutu says they only learnt about the hui through an advertisement in the New Zealand Herald.
They've had no connection to our marae, to our land, ever before, other than wanting to build a factory there. And suddenly they can just roll over the top of us and treat us not only like we don't exist, but like that we're something that somebody stood on.
Tegel says tonight's hui is the first of many about the project. A person has been found dead at the scene of a suspicious house fire in Christchurch. Emergency services were called just after midday to a suspicious house fire in Horswell. Detective Senior Sergeant Greg Cottam says police officers and firefighters found a person dead at the home. He says the death is being treated as unexplained and an investigation is underway. A scene guard will be placed at the home overnight. Scrap metal dealers are being asked to keep watch for a number of bronze plaques stolen from Wellington's Botanic Garden over the last week. The manager, David Soul, says they've been removed from a World War I artefact, a sculpture and memorial chairs. He says it'll take some time to check the entire gardens for any more missing plaques.
We think at this stage there are around 6 or 7. There could be more. There are dozens and dozens of plaques in the gardens. It'll take us a while to get around them all. The dealers tell us that the metal is not worth very much. The value to us is in the casting and in the casting process. For those plaques, we're looking somewhere in the region of $8,000 to $10,000 to replace them.
Wellington Botanic Gardens manager David Soul. It's 6:05. Sport. Filling the void left by Sonny Bill Williams is the biggest head-scratcher for coach Steve Hansen before the first All Blacks Test team of the year is unveiled tomorrow morning. Hansen will be able to field a team close to full strength for the first test against France at Eden Park on Saturday, but he's without Sonny Bill Williams for the entire series after the recurrence of a knee injury. One midfield slot will go to Ryan Crotty with Ngani Laumape or Anton Leonard-Brown, the leading contenders for the other midfield spot. But Crotty's Crusaders teammate Jack Goodhue could also get a test debut. The White Ferns pace bowler Leah Tahuhu says there's plenty of motivation to perform in their Northern Tour, which starts tonight with a T20 International against Ireland in Dublin. The New Zealanders play 4 games against Ireland before heading to the UK to meet England and South Africa in a T20 tri-series, and then England in 3 one-dayers. Following last year's World Cup disappointment, Leah Tahuhu says the White Ferns are hoping for redemption in England.
A lot of us were over there last year for the World Cup and we're pretty disappointed with how we went, so we're looking forward to getting over there and hopefully ironing out a few of those things and having a really good tour against England and also South Africa in the T20s.
White Ferns bowler Leah Tahuhu. That's the news.
The cost of the math mess.
I was devastated. It was my first real home for me and my daughter, and it was just taken away and we had absolutely nowhere to go.
Finally fronting up.
We really regret the way this has played out, and we certainly apologise to all those people who've had their lives disrupted.
No pathway forwards yet.
We're waiting to see what comes back from the individual work Housing New Zealand's doing to check on the circumstances under which some of these people were evicted.
Morning Report with Guy Espino and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, charities working with prisoners say the Corrections Department makes it too difficult for their volunteers to get access. And after 10, LA Times music critic Robert Hilburn on his new official biography of Paul Simon. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Waitomo, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Showers today, some heavy with hail and possible thunderstorms in the west, mainly fine tomorrow, apart from showers persisting about Northland. Taranaki, Taumaranui and Taihape to Wellington, also Gisborne to Wairarapa. Showers some heavy with hail and snow to 500 metres for a time. Thunderstorms possible about Gisborne and Northern Hawke's Bay this evening. Nelson, Buller and Westland, fine today, cloudy periods tomorrow with brief showers. Marlborough and Canterbury mainly fine inland, but showers near the coast with snow above 300 metres. Widespread rain for a time overnight or in the morning, icy conditions inland. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, showers falling as snow above 200 metres at first, icy conditions inland. And the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with 1 or 2 showers. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. I'm Sharon Brett-Kelly in for John Campbell. In breaking news, the Tauranga City Council has voted in principle to repurchase the homes in the botched Bella Vista housing development. The residents were evacuated in March due to safety concerns and today made impassioned pleas to the council to take responsibility for signing off on what they describe as sloppy building work. The council has just voted to acquire the 21 properties and enter into negotiations with homeowners towards full and final settlement. The former High Court judge, the Honourable Paul Heath QC, this afternoon presented a report to the council that looks into its role in the Bella Vista development. And the report says that while council dealt adequately with resource consent applications, it failed in other areas, including monitoring and inspections. And a major issue for the development is the lack of retaining walls, which Mr Heath says should have been considered further by council. And there'll be more on this throughout this evening and tomorrow on RNZ. The Minister for EQC has called for immediate changes in response to a damning report into EQC's practices released this afternoon. The report from Ministerial Advisor Christine Stevenson identified an organisation in disarray with a lack of staff, incomplete data and a culture of holding back the resolution of claims. Megan Woods says the report also identifies a looming problem of on-solds where more and more homeowners are discovering they own houses with botched EQC repairs. Ms Woods also revealed she met with the board of the insurer IAG last week about revising its statute of limitations to consider claims on a case-by-case basis. I asked her if she was surprised at the report's findings.
No, I wasn't surprised. I was relieved to see that there were recommendations to address those systemic problems. I think that these are issues that people on the ground in Christchurch have been witnessing for a number of years now. But I think Christine's done a fantastic job in bringing together a lot of those problems and coming up with very practical and immediate steps that can be taken to address a number of these issues.
How are you going to resolve the 2,600 outstanding claims?
Well, it's actually 3,600 now, but of course EQC found the additional 900 odd in recent weeks. Look, I think the immediate and practical steps are the best way to start. One of those is hiring more staff so we can have the claims management with the caseload being spread across a team of 30-odd people that will have a caseload of around 100 cases each that will be able to work with the claimants to try and work towards resolution of those claims. Making people's files available to them. And one of the first steps that we are going to do is have EQC go down and actually physically pull the files from the stacks and make sure all the data is where it's meant to be. Because as you've said, that data has been identified as one of the issues that has been holding back resolution.
A lot of these claims are complex though. I mean, can the staff really handle 100 claims each?
Well, look, some of these claims are complex, and that 100 is sort of an average. That there will be a group of people that do complex claims that have fewer. But look, in reality, some of these claims are too complex to be settled by a claims management process, and that's precisely why there's money in this year's budget for us to set up the tribunal, which will provide a mechanism for the settling of those very difficult and complex cases.
You talked about problems around data collection and continuity. Did you understand how bad things truly were there?
Well, I think that after Christine had completed her report, we had the extra 900 cases come through in terms of the migration between the versions of the system. People have long talked about the inability to get the data they require out of EQC. I'd also been hearing in the months since I've become minister from the private insurers their frustrations in terms of not knowing the numbers that were coming across as overcapped claims. So it wasn't surprising. That gives me no comfort, but I think that data is a key issue that needs to be addressed, and that's why I'm pleased to see the recommendation around needing to have a dedicated team ensuring that there is quality around that data.
What about on-solds? I mean, they are proving problematic. EQC's already spent more than $270 million on botched repairs. How are you going to resolve the on-sold issue, given there may be many more homes out there and they don't even know they've got the problem?
Absolutely. And look, on-solds is one of those issues that keeps me awake at night. I think that it is a complicated and potentially looming problem for Christchurch as well, as you say, that we don't know the quantum of what is out there. One of the key things that I've talked about it before is the need for us actually to settle where the liability lies. As you know, and is well canvassed on this show, just how complex this issue is and the various and many ways in which this can become a tangle.
Minister, what advice do you give to people looking at buying a house in Christchurch now, thinking it's been properly repaired?
Well, I think that, as always, making sure that you're getting those building and engineering reports done is absolutely critical. Talking to the homeowner, understanding what repairs have been done. But look, I understand. I live in Christchurch. I understand the kind of the unease that some people feel, and we need to make sure that we get this situation sorted so people can have that level of comfort.
The EQC Chief Executive, Sid Miller, what conversation have you had with him about this report?
Look, I've spoken to Sid today and he's committed to taking on board the recommendations of the report. I think he can see that there's a number of really sensible and practical changes that they could make in their organisation that would allow them to settle these claims.
Do you have confidence that he can carry this out?
Yes, I do. I think that there's a good roadmap here of changes that need to be made. There's these immediate and practical changes and recommendations that can be implemented, but there's also some of the longer term. But this report can't be read in isolation. We need to read it in concert with the other measures that we as a government are taking, and that's around the establishing the tribunal, setting up the independent inquiry, that this requires a commitment from a number of parts of government to ensure that we can get people's houses fixed and they can get on with their lives.
Why is he refusing to comment today though? I mean, we've been trying to reach him and other executives at EQC. None of them are responding. Shouldn't he be available to talk to us?
Well, look, this is actually a report that is being released about EQC. Christine Stevenson, who is the author of the report, and myself held a press conference here in Christchurch and were available to take questions. This was a day for people to talk about the report and the recommendations that were being made. So
you don't think that he should front up today?
Look, that's a matter for Sid, but I actually think it's appropriate that the author of the report, Christine Stevenson, gets to put forward what her recommendations are, that this is actually about what needs to change at EQC, and I'm sure there'll be ample opportunity to talk to Sid about what is going to happen in terms of those recommendations.
Looking at IAG, are there any developments with them revising their statute of limitations? I mean, we understand that they will look at things on a case-by-case basis. What's your understanding?
Yes, look, I've written to IAG and I went and met with their board last week. Around that, I've received a commitment from them that they will look at that on a case-by-case basis. I've also talked to the Residential Advisory Service about making sure that we can get the resources in place for people to be able to make that approach to IAG so that people know exactly what it is that they're asking for.
That's the Minister for EQC, Megan Woods, and IAG has confirmed in a statement the deadline for its customers with regard to the Limitations Act is 30th of June 2018, but it is happy to consider individual requests from customers for specific extensions beyond this date. Taranaki's flagship stadium has been condemned after geotechnical testing showed the bank under its west stand is a significant earthquake risk. The testing was commissioned after a November report found the Yarrow Stadium's east stand was earthquake prone. Taranaki Rugby CEO Jeremy Parkinson says the closure comes just 10 weeks before the start of the Mitre 10 Cup, leaving the Taranaki Bulls without a home base. He told me he was delivered the news late yesterday afternoon.
Shock initially, but effectively we've got to be solutions orientated. We've got a Mitre 10 Cup competition starting in 10 weeks' time. And the decision's been made in the best interest of the public. So effectively, it's still a game of rugby on a rugby field with two teams. It's just the infrastructure around it. So it's our job to go out and find an alternative solution in the region where we can play our fixtures.
And what is that solution?
Oh, there's a number of options. We do have pre-Mitre 10 Cup Shield challenges coming up. We play Poverty Bay out at the Clifton Rugby Club in Tikarangi on Saturday the 28th of July. And then we also play Wanganui in Harara at the TSB Stadium in South Taranaki. So there's venues there, and there's also been fixtures played at TT Stadium in Inglewood as well. We had a Ranfurly Shield challenge there in 2012 when we hosted King Country, and indicative sort of figures were around sort of 6,000 people were in attendance there. So there are options. It's just not at the level that we've been used to and the home of Taranaki Rugby, which is Yarrow Stadium.
What about long term? How confident are you that Yarrow Stadium will be restored?
I suppose it's been a big decision to close it to the public. So with that being made, it's obviously there's some significant issues there. We're just a tenant, so we have a lease at the stadium, so we're currently without a home. So we need to address 2018 first, get through that, and then take a deep breath and work with everyone in and around what's best for the region in regards to a regional stadium.
Back in November, a report found that the stadium's east stand was earthquake prone. So how concerned were you back then that it might be more widespread than that?
So the understanding is it's the west stand is fine structurally. It's just the ground that it sits on is not stable and suitable to support the structure. So I suppose the geotech report saying in the event of a seismic event that potentially the whole bank would slide away and the stadium would collapse onto itself. So they've made the call that that's too big a risk to the public. So that's my take on it. And the east stand is obviously on similar ground. So the understanding is all the issues are below the ground.
This is a real blow, isn't it? Not just for rugby, but for other sporting events in Taranaki.
Totally. There has been not just Ranfurly Shield, Mitre 10 Cup, All Black Test matches, Super Rugby games. Also, the Warriors have played there. There's been FIFA Under-20 World Cup fixtures. It is a regional event centre, Yarrow Stadium. It's not just a rugby stadium, but there's national and international events played there. So yeah, and those events, when they happen, they bring revenue into the region, and we all know the spin-offs around hospitality and accommodation and everything associated with big events. So yeah, it is a concern.
And that's Taranaki Rugby Chief Executive Jeremy Parkinson. It could take months to clean up Tolaga Bay after flash flooding. Power has now been restored to about 30 East Coast properties, but a handful in remote areas are still thought to be cut off. Civil Defence is still assessing the damage to roads and homes, with more heavy rain expected tonight. Tom Furley reports.
3 families forced out of their homes by flooding on Monday have still not returned home and are staying with whānau. Tairāwhiti Civil Defence Emergency Manager Louise Bennett says the clean-up is going to take months, but things are progressing.
There's been some good news in that all residents have got power, but there are still some issues with the roads, and the bridges are being assessed, but they're not able to assess what's underneath the bridges, and there's still a lot of slips and debris on the road. Contractors
are working through bridges road by road and opening them as they go.
They're working as hard as they can, and in some situations they're finding that the damage is worse than they thought, and in other situations it's not as bad. So I can't give you any timelines, and the roading manager would not be able to either. They're just working through it. Health and safety of the residents and the people who travel on the roads is paramount, and that's what they have to consider.
Residents on Arakihi Road were cut off, though Ms Bennett says contractors have gotten through and the welfare team is working with residents. However, there are others that remain isolated.
Well, there are still 3 families that were moved out of their house and staying with whānau in Uawa, and I think probably we could be looking at a dozen families that are still shut off on some of those roads, and they're progressively opening the other roads, so more and more people are getting access and being able to come into town.
The Met Service has issued a heavy rain watch for Gisborne south of Te Puia Springs, with up to 25 millimetres falling per hour at its peak in thunderstorms. Snow may also fall to 500 metres. Louise Bennett says Civil Defence will be hoping their hard work isn't undone.
Our flood warning officers have done some modelling themselves, and we just hope that it doesn't eventuate. But if it does, we will deal with it at the time.
Is it looking like it could cause much damage, or it's unlikely at this stage?
It's unlikely at this stage from the modelling they've used, but as we know, weather's not predictable, and so that's why we will be monitoring it overnight.
The rain is expected from 9 o'clock tonight through until early tomorrow morning. For Checkpoint, Tom Furley.
The US President Donald Trump has turned his battle with the football players into an all-out war after uninviting the Super Bowl winners, the Philadelphia Eagles, to join him at a celebration at the White House. Many of the team has said they did not want to attend the event over the president's demand that the NFL make players stand for the national anthem instead of bending their knee as a protest of social injustice. The White House labelled it a political stunt, and the President promptly cancelled the invitation to host them. The ABC's Stephanie March has more.
On the south lawn of the White House, the US Marine Band and Army Chorus loudly and proudly belted out the Star-Spangled Banner. Singing along at times was the President. He was joined by 1,000 Philadelphia Eagles fans who'd come to the White House to honour their team's Super Bowl win. But the guests of honour were nowhere in sight. Mr. Trump uninvited the entire team late last night after discovering only 10 players planned to attend. That didn't stop him being booed in his own backyard.
Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it. I want to thank the United States Marine Band and the United States Army Chorus for that incredible performance. Their voices, oh, I'd love to have a voice like that.
It's the latest development in Mr. Trump's ongoing culture war with the NFL and its players over some athletes' decision during the 2017 season to take a knee during the national anthem in protest of police violence towards African Americans. In September, he described players who don't stand as disrespectful sons of bitches who should be fired. After pressure from the President last month, the league released new guidelines. Players must either stand for the song or remain in the locker room. Former Eagles team member Torrey Smith says on Twitter the players' decision to skip the White House celebration has nothing to do with Mr. Trump's insistence they stand for the anthem. Instead, they just didn't want to see him. Philadelphia Eagles defender Malcolm Jenkins echoed those comments, noting that no one on his team knelt during the 2017 season.
There's so much that's been kind of swirling around the administration that I don't see it as beneficial at this moment in time to visit in a celebratory fashion. But I know for a fact that there are other guys who've dreamt of the opportunity to go to the White House, and I think they should have that opportunity.
White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders says it was a political stunt by the Eagles.
Look, if this wasn't a political stunt by the Eagles franchise, then they wouldn't have planned to attend the event and then backed out at the last minute.
The Eagles aren't the first sports franchise to turn down a White House visit. In basketball, the Golden State Warriors refused an invitation last year. Speaking today, players from the Warriors and the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are playing for the NBA title, say they would not attend the White House if they become champions. Cavaliers star LeBron James.
I'm not surprised. It's typical of them, and I don't know. I mean, I know no matter who wins this series, no one wants to invite anyway, so it won't be Golden State or Cleveland going.
And that was LeBron James ending that report from the ABC's Stephanie March. Fashion designer Kate Spade has been found dead in her New York apartment. The 55-year-old designer, who once edited fashion magazine Mademoiselle, was well known as a designer of clothes, shoes and handbags. Zachary Goldman from Reuters reports.
The fashion designer Kate Spade was found dead in an apparent suicide in her New York City apartment on Tuesday. The New York Daily News cited police sources that she was found by her housekeeper at her home on Park Avenue on Manhattan's Upper East Side.
There was a suicide note left at the scene. I'm not going to get into the contents of that note, but that appears to be the sum total of what it is at this point. But we still have detectives on the scene. It's still a fairly fresh incident.
Born Catherine Brosnahan in Kansas City, she married Andy Spade, brother of actor David Spade. Kate and Andy formed a business under her name in 1993 and began by selling women's handbags. She spoke about her burgeoning success with CBS News in 1999.
There was a lack of interesting accessories that had a personality but still were very elegant and functional. And I loved the idea of using really beautiful fabrics, and I didn't see a lot of that. So
the brand grew into an empire. Her brightly colored, clean-lined style offered a fresh take on fashion at a time when luxury handbags were unaffordable to most and the industry was dominated by venerable European brands. Among her innovations, placing her label visibly on her bags.
I remember thinking, there's something missing. I want something for my eye to go to. And so the label that was meant to go on the inside, I took it out of the box and I sewed it on the outside, and that was it.
The couple sold their remaining shares in the firm in 2006 to focus on raising their daughter, Frances Beatrix Spade. In 2016, they launched a new footwear and accessories brand called Frances Valentine, naming it after their daughter, who is now 13. Spade was 55 years old.
And that is Checkpoint this evening. Have a great evening.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Tauranga City Council has voted to buy the 21 properties in the failed Bella Vista subdivision and negotiate a settlement with the owners. Minister Megan Woods has told Checkpoint she's confident that the head of EQC is committed to making the changes recommended by a report released today. The Taranaki Rugby Union is shocked by the indefinite closure of Yarrow Stadium in New Plymouth due to earthquake risk. Civil Defence on the East Coast is still assessing the flood damage to roads and homes in Tolaga Bay, with more heavy rain expected tonight. And snow and slush is set to turn to ice as treacherous driving conditions continue in Otago and Southland. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Kia ora, I'm Melody Thomas and I'm back with Season 2 of the podcast Bang, exploring sex, relationships and intimacy. Tonight